Hi there, my name's Annie and you're listening to the MumLife Australia podcast. This is a very special episode of the podcast all about raising awareness about perinatal depression and anxiety. Up to 1 in 10 expecting mums struggle with antenatal depression and more than 1 in 7 mums are diagnosed with postnatal depression each year. Even more are thought to suffer with anxiety. In this episode, PANDA community champion Laura Mazza shares her experience with perinatal depression and anxiety. Laura is a mum of 2 young children and author of the blog The Mum on the Run. Laura is best known for speaking honestly about the realities of motherhood and has even appeared on national television and in the media to talk about the struggles facing mums. We talk specifically about the signs and symptoms, support available for those experiencing depression and anxiety, recovering from a traumatic birth experience, the effects of sleep deprivation on maternal mental health, the perfect mum and our quest for perfection, beating the superwoman complex, and the importance of self-care. Plus, Laura shares her tips for supporting someone who is experiencing depression and anxiety and her number 1 advice for all mums and mums-to-be. Hi Laura, thank you so much for chatting with me today. How are you?
I'm really well. How are you?
I'm very well for asking. Look, I have so much that I want to chat with you today about, and there's so much I want to deep dive into, but perhaps a really good place to start is, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I can. So I'm a mum from Melbourne and I have 2 children, Luca, who's 2.5, and Sophia, who's 9 months. I'm a mummy blogger and I am currently studying a Master's of Social Work, which I've just taken a year off from to have Sophia because I know you can't do a million things at once. And I've also studied an undergrad in psych. And that's pretty much my life at the moment.
Wow, yeah, you say that we can't do a million things at once, but we try, don't we?
Yes, always, fortunately.
Now, Laura, you recently announced that you have become a community champion for PANDA, which is Perinatal Anxiety and Depression Australia. What does that mean and what inspired you to become a community champion?
Well, I think PANDA is just an amazing organisation and it's run by a group of people, mostly volunteers, who just have a genuine want to help parents overcome depression and anxiety. I had depression and anxiety and I still have, some off days. Not everything's perfect. And I just found them to be incredibly helpful. So upon my journey of trying to get better, I've sort of still been communicating with them and sharing my stories. And they actually approached me and asked me if I would like to be a community champion, which is just basically getting the word out there about postnatal depression and anxiety and, trying to empower other mothers to come forward and talk about their experiences and, feel good about parenting again, as well as dads and just bringing awareness to the community.
That's fantastic, Laura. I'm so glad that you've taken that upon yourself to do. It's such a big problem in modern day society. I think the stats at the moment are that 1 in 7 women and 1 in 10 men experience postnatal depression. So having that awareness there is just so important because I can only imagine that there are so many others out there that never actually get diagnosed. So they're not even being picked up in those numbers. So creating that awareness is just so important. And obviously this episode of the MumLife Australia podcast, it is to bring awareness this week. So the 13th of November through to the 19th of November is actually Perinatal Depression and Anxiety Awareness Week. So I'm really glad that you're here to speak to us about your experience. So what was your experience? How were you affected by postnatal depression and anxiety?
Well, for me, it kind of started in pregnancy. It's so funny. When you're in it, you can't actually see it at all. And now I can look back and say, oh, yeah, that was a moment and this is a moment. And now I look back and I see with my first child, when I was pregnant with him, I had a lot of anxiety. And it wasn't so much about becoming a parent. I thought I was going to be the best parent and nothing, I could do no wrong. But it was all about the relationships that I have with people and, family members and friends and how they would welcome my child in. Are they going to love him as much as I love him? And, now I look back and I can sort of see that fear and that worry that it was not irrational, but it was, it was kind of irrational because I was so anxious about the love that he was going to receive. I thought, is he going to miss out? I can see now that that was a sign of prenatal anxiety. And for me, the anxiety and depression really started after I'd given birth. So labour was fine. It was sort of everything that came afterwards that I had no idea. With mums, we're dealing with breastfeeding, which I thought was going to be, a walk in the park. And when it wasn't, I felt so depressed because I felt like I had bailed. And I was trying to deal with that as well as trying to deal with my body recovering from a traumatic birth. So I actually made, people sort of gave me a lot of documents and handed out brochures for PANDA, and I was like, oh, look, nothing's really wrong. It's just, if this was okay, and if breastfeeding worked, then I wouldn't feel depressed. If my body wasn't recovering, then I would feel okay, and sort of make excuses. And it wasn't until I kind of made a phone call to PANDA and spoke to a lady, and I stayed anonymous. And when I spoke to this lady, she just kind of normalised things and made me realise, there is a bit of something more going on here.
So what was that turning point, though? How did you go from, okay, look, nothing's really wrong, to, okay, I've got to make this phone call? Was there a trigger, or it was just you realised, well, actually, I think maybe this isn't right?
Yeah, I think, I was sort of crying for weeks on end. I know that you kind of get the baby blues when you have a baby, but from what I was told, it wasn't until, day 3, and it sort of lasts for a couple of days and then you're fine. But for me, it just didn't go away. And I don't want to say that I didn't love my baby, because I love my son, love him so much, but I just didn't enjoy him at all. And I was just so stuck in this moment, and I thought, all I want to do is just feel better. So at that point, I was like, look, you got to do whatever it takes to get to that happy place.
This reminds me very much of a conversation I had with Amy Taylor-Kabaz on one of the earlier podcast episodes. She's the happy mama, and she was talking about that turning point women have where they realise that they've lost their shine. She said that often you have to show somebody that it's actually for the well-being of their family and everybody else, which is why they need to make a change. Sometimes, especially as women, we just don't think about ourselves first. We think about everybody else. So it's interesting that you said that. You were just like, look, I need to make a change and this isn't going to happen by itself. I listened to so much of what you've just said, and I can relate to so much of that. And to be honest, I was never diagnosed with postnatal depression or anxiety, and I never got any help. But the more I learn about this and the more I hear, I can really relate to some of these signs and symptoms. And I feel like that there are so many women, and hopefully we can catch some of them that might be listening to this podcast and encourage them to perhaps even just seek out some support to determine whether they do need some help. It's hard to find that balance between the message of it's okay to not be okay, and
totally.
to say that there is a problem. So what might be some other signs that, so you said that you were crying and you didn't feel like you were enjoying your child. What might be some other signs that you might experience if you've got a bit of postnatal depression and anxiety?
I used to feel that sleep would fix everything. If I just got 4 hours straight sleep, I would feel amazing. And don't get me wrong, not having sleep is torture. But sometimes even if I got 8 hours, it just wouldn't satisfy it. I could sleep 20 hours, and I'd still need more, because you just need that time to switch off. I didn't want to be alone with my son. If I would invite people over, even though I liked to be isolated, and I like to keep myself isolated. I didn't want to be alone with him. When my husband was home, it's like I felt safe. I thought nothing can go wrong now. I wanted him to always sleep. I was obsessed with him sleeping, because I felt like as soon as he slept, everything was safe. I could relax. I didn't have to be on edge anymore. I'm totally scared of going out, hated going out, would always cancel plans. And I just felt like I didn't deserve, or I couldn't be a mum. I'm Laura. I'm crazy. I'm wild. I can't be a mum. Being a mum means you're, organised and, ready for the challenge. But I just didn't feel like that. And now I've learnt that you can be a mum tattooed and, never have your stuff together, and you're still a great mum. So
that's exactly right. We always say that all you can do is the best for your family. best for my family might look completely different to what's best for your family, but that doesn't matter as long as you're doing what's best for your family. How were the people around you? So as you were going through this journey, did you find that people around you, so perhaps your partner and your friends, did they realize more than perhaps you did that you might have been experiencing something, or were they more like, okay, no, Laura, you're fine, you don't have a problem, this is all normal?
Yeah, my dad is very old school, and he was like, "No, you're fine, you're fine. You know, you don't need medication, you don't need help. You know, just control your mind. You know, train your mind to stop thinking about it." I love when people say to people who have anxiety, you know, stop thinking about it. You know, oh, if we could, we would. But I actually found, you know, I had friends who would sort of hint for little things and say, "Oh, you know, my friend felt like this way and she had postnatal depression," and I'd kind of be like, "Oh, you know, your poor friend," or, you know, I wouldn't really take it in. And I think my husband, poor guy, I guess he just didn't really understand. He didn't know how deep it was, because I was also very good at wearing a mask and hiding things.
We all are. That's what we are. As mums,
totally.
we are professional wearers of masks.
Yeah. And I just joke for everything. Like, you know, even it's funny, I could be, you know, the hospital can say to me, you know, what's your 10 out of 10 pain? Or, you know, is 1 being the least, or 10, and I'd be saying 10 but still trying to smile. And, you know, or you still kind of apologize like, "Oh, 10, I'm sorry." You know, you just feel like you don't deserve to feel these emotions, so you've got to put that mask on and pretend that everything's okay. So, you know, he didn't understand the full depth of it, I guess.
Yeah, and I think I think that's really common. I remember speaking to a girlfriend who had a baby at the same time as I did, and we were both struggling a lot. And she said, and she was talking about her husband, and she said, "I just wish he'd stop saying I'm fine. I'm not fine. I know I'm not fine, but he keeps telling me that I'm fine and that it's okay and that I'm doing a good job. But I don't feel any of those things." So it's interesting for you to have said that as well, because I think that's a lot of the things we get from those people around us is people just kind of go, "Oh, no, you're okay. You're doing all right." And then we wear these masks because we feel like, well, if everybody thinks we're doing okay, well, we have to keep on that facade. The problem with wearing that mask is that if we're all wearing that mask, then how is that mum sitting at home crying because she just can't handle that transition to motherhood? How is she supposed to know that she's actually not alone if everybody around her is also struggling, but they're wearing masks too? It's really difficult.
100%. And I think with the people who say, you know, "You're fine, you're fine," I think a big part of them just want you to be fine. And it's also brings out emotions for them that they don't want to deal with. So it's like everybody's sweeping everything under the rug, and, you know, it's just not working. So it's so much better to just release those emotions and talk about it. And, you know, for me, it's done wonders.
So what was that? What happened? So you called up PANDA and you spoke to somebody anonymously. What was the next step? What happened from that point onwards?
Well, I was still attending mothers group, and at every session I feel so sorry for the mums in my mothers group, because all I would do was whinge about how my son wouldn't sleep, and that would be all I talked about. And then one of the facilitators there started talking about sleep school. She was just sort of listening to me talk, and could sort of see my emotions going up and down. And she asked me to come outside, and she said, you know, "So tell me, what's your experience been like, you know, as a mother?" And I started talking and saying how horrible it was. You know, I had nothing good to say, and I was just saying how, you know, my husband and I just kept fighting because we're both so sleep deprived, you know. And I was like pretty much gripping onto her, saying, you know, "Help me get sleep." So she said, "Look, I'll send, you know, an enhanced team to your home," which is something that any mum can access. You can go through your maternal child health nurse, and you can get, you know, an enhanced team come out, and they're just they're maternal child health nurses, but they specialise in certain things. So I actually was lucky enough to get a lady who came out and sort of briefly helped me with sleep, but then she could see that wasn't really the issue. And then I was lucky enough to get this lady called Pauline. So she had actually studied psychology, and she was a nurse. I love this woman. She changed my life completely, because she just listened to me, and she let me for about 3 weeks straight, and she would come once a week, or maybe even longer than that, just ramble about sleep. And then one day I said, you know, "I don't like my son," you know, and I visualized myself shaking him so he would just stop crying. It actually makes me emotional to talk about it, because I remember that pain that I felt. And she said, "Okay, you know, now we can really talk, and let's talk about that." And so she booked me into a mother-baby unit, which is basically, a special ward for mothers who just need help and need some rest from that mental and physical exhaustion. And that place even helped me and changed my life. And so from then on, now I'm in contact with psychologists, I see psychiatrists, I go to anything that I can, group meetings, and I put my hand up for everything, because after I broke that sort of silence and that lady Pauline sort of liberated me, I feel like now I'm deserving of help, and there's so much help that you can get, and you don't realize when you're in it. You think you're sort of a little bit embarrassed, and you don't think there's, I used to think, oh, no one can help me, I just need him to sleep, and no one can help me do that. But now I see there's so much, you can get people to come to your house to help your child sleep, and just to have a chat to somebody. There's just so much help that you can get. You just need to admit that how you're feeling and raise your hand and say, I need help.
Yeah.
And it changes your life.
That's amazing. I have tears streaming down my face as you talk, because you're totally not alone here. And it's so interesting that you bring up this thing about, if only my baby was to sleep, or if only I could breastfeed, I wouldn't feel this way, because that's exactly what I was. I was obsessed with my child's sleep, and I just kept saying, oh, well, if she slept and if she didn't cry so much, I wouldn't feel this way. And you've just revealed that sometimes we can use those things like, oh, if only I could breastfeed, or if only I could get my child to sleep. We use that as the barrier. We put that up in front of us because we're too afraid, I guess, perhaps of admitting that we might have a problem or we might need help. But I think that's really interesting, is that key message of sometimes we have to look deeper than it's not just the circumstances. And what you've described there is also that superwoman complex, that I can fix everything. If I fix this problem, if I fix this, then all of my problems will disappear. And I think back to when I had my first Delilah, I had so many of those fix this moments. If I could fix her reflux, everything would be perfect. If I could get her to go to sleep, everything would be perfect. And you're right, it's got nothing to do with those little problems. Of course, they put that pressure on you, but it's what's deep down that's actually the issue. So that's really interesting that you say that, and I'm so glad you were able to get that support. How did you then go from then having your second? Was it scary to think, okay, well, this second child could then be a trigger, or what was that like for you?
Now my head is swimming. So with my daughter, Sophia, when I got pregnant with her, was a surprise. I was probably going to wait till my son was 30 before I even thought about having another child, because it was so traumatic for me.
Oh, Laura, it's like I'm talking to the same person. That was me. Yep. Surprise baby number 2 when I had no intention of having another one for a really long time. Yep. Sorry, go on.
I think the universe does that to you, to say, no, you need to have another child, so we're just gonna put it in you. So then you have no choice. Because I don't think I would have otherwise. I was super anxious. I won't go into major details, but long story short, I told the hospital that I was going to, that this is exactly how I'm feeling. I don't want to have another baby. I'm scared, and I don't want to go through the same things again. I got in contact with Pauline again. I was speaking to PANDA again. I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I knew that I would love this baby and I would die for this baby, and I would do anything for it. I was so scared. And so when I started talking to the hospital, I then started seeing a psychiatrist, and he was I actually can't remember his name now, and he was such a great guy, and he really made me feel a lot more confident about birth, and he made me feel a bit more assertive and more empowered. And I actually wrote a birth plan. With my first, I had no birth plan, just didn't care at all. It was like, just get it out, as long as I'm alive, I'm happy. This one, it was like, the lights have to be dim. There can only be one person in the room. Like I thought, no, this is my birth. This is how I want it. And it was actually, it was the best experience of my life. And I didn't actually get any drugs until I was 10 centimeters. So for me to say that, and I'm the biggest wuss with pain, just goes to show you that if you empower yourself in your birth, it just changes everything. I had lots of skin-to-skin time with her, and that sort of started, it was like an easy birth, easy labour, easy child. At the start, admittedly, I was freaking out and I went back on medication. I'm like, I can't do this. 2 under 2, one's crying, the other one's crying. And I would just go into the toilet, shut the door and scream at the top of my lungs, just to get it out. And then I don't know what sort of happened. I thought, I started to believe in myself more, and I thought, no, you've been through this before, you can do this. And it just sort of changed. She sleeps, so that does help.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, so, even though we say, it's not just sleep, when they do sleep, it does help a lot.
Oh, it does. There are studies. We talked about this with Alice Callaghan, who's the author of Science of Mum, and there's been studies that have written all about how sleep deprivation can affect mental health. So there's no doubt that there is some significance that sleep plays. Absolutely. We can't downplay that. That's absolutely true.
A mother's job is so tough anyway, so we need to be rested and we need to be looked after as well. And that's kind of the mindset that I had with the second child. I thought, no, this time it's about me. I'm not going to put pressure on myself to, breastfeed. I'll do my best. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So I made sure that I treated myself as a priority. I created a little village to make sure that I could get that alone time and rest time and still tried to keep my identity as well.
It's a message we need to spread to new mums as well, that you can be a brilliant mum. You probably will never be a perfect mum because perfect mum does not exist, but you can be a brilliant mum and still take time for yourself, because at the end of the day, if you don't carve out that time for yourself, you can't serve anyone else. It's just exactly not possible. And I think that's one of the messages we need to send to new mums is that, don't look at that superwoman you might see in the supermarket. You need to take that time to yourself, because you can't serve your kids and you can't give them what they need if you're not giving yourself what you need. It's so important, and it's such a shame that women and mums are made to feel guilty about that, and we need to really change that stigma around women putting themselves first.
I'm very much now of the mindset. I was always trying to be the perfect mother, and then when I sort of changed my world, I thought, it was so much nicer for me and on me. The pressure was completely off when I just admitted how hard it was. And it was like other women would sort of say, and other mothers would say, I feel that way too, I feel that way too. And now I actually feel liberated and empowered when I talk about how hard it is. And, or if my kid's having a meltdown at a supermarket, it's actually it's like a good thing now. It's like, yes, we're all human, he's human, he's expressing his emotions, maybe I can get down, throw a tantrum, it just feels good once you sort of, take that pressure off yourself, because you're human and you deserve happiness. And it's so hard when we're just trying to be perfect, because there's just no such thing.
So well said. Okay, Laura, I want to know what helped you. So let's think about somebody who's sitting at home who might be thinking, oh, God, I've got a friend who might be in a mother's group or a sister. What advice have you got to somebody who might be supporting someone who has postnatal depression and anxiety, or perhaps even in your situation where they've got a friend who they think might have postnatal depression and anxiety but just doesn't know it? What's your advice for them supporting those other people in their lives? What can they do?
I think the main thing is to be kind and be patient, and don't take anything that they do personally. They might cancel on you a lot, but what they need the most is for you to just stick by them no matter what. I guess you can kind of gauge the type of friend that you have if they're open to talking about things. I know with certain people, I felt a little bit embarrassed when they sort of tried to hint that I had postnatal depression. Now, I think, it's never something to be embarrassed about, but everyone's experience is different. So, some people still might feel a little bit uncomfortable talking about it. So the best advice I could give is go over to their house, bring them coffee, always bring wine if you can, if they want to drink, and just let them talk. Don't try to counsel them as such unless they want your advice and they want to open up, but just let them offload and say, there are options, or there are help that you can get. There is help that you can get, and, maybe sort of suggest a few things here and there, but let them know that you're always there for them no matter what.
I remember when I was really struggling, I remember a girlfriend said, you need to get out. You need to be away from your baby. Yeah. You need to have a break. And she said, you actually need to go and speak to somebody. I don't care who you speak to or what you do. Just go and sit somewhere. And I said, I can't because she's not sleeping and she needs to be sleeping and this and this and this. And I made so many excuses. And I look back now and I'm like, they were just excuses. They were just excuses because I was too scared to do that. And she came over and she basically said, you either sit here and you talk to me or you go and have a coffee, but whatever you choose to do, I just need you to spend an hour for yourself. And I remember just being like, okay. And I grabbed my keys and I remember going and sitting somewhere and I was like, that's what I needed. What I needed, because I had so many excuses. I just literally needed somebody to pick me up and go away just for a second and think for yourself. That's what I needed. And that really helped me. But you're right. Everybody's experience is so different. So we really, I guess, need to be very mindful of what stage they're in and how to approach that as well, I think is very important too. I mean, of course, we could always contact PANDA as well if we have a friend who might need some support or somebody we think might be struggling with parenthood, because this isn't a problem just for mothers. This is also a problem that affects dads as well. So if we have somebody in our lives and we think they might be struggling and we don't know how to approach it and what to do, then giving PANDA a call in those circumstances might also be a really good idea.
They have a hotline and their volunteers are just so knowledgeable. They've gone through it themselves or they've had friends or families that have gone through it, and they'll direct you in the right way of what to do and what to say. They're amazing.
They truly are, and it's amazing that it is a volunteer resource and that anybody can call up and you can just call up and speak to somebody. So is that the advice then for somebody who's perhaps listening to this podcast, perhaps nodding their head throughout the whole thing and then realizing perhaps when at the end of this discussion thinking, oh, I think I might need to speak to somebody. Is that what you might suggest is the first point of call?
I think they need to call your friend and get advice from them and go over there and demand that their friend goes out. But I think that was really good. But 100%, if you're sort of not sure how to tackle it, just give PANDA a call and they'll be able to tell you and even give you resources. Encourage them to talk to their maternal child health nurse. They're also always willing to help and they can give an abundance of resources, and they've got a lot of information on PANDA and, the statistics and, the signs to look out for that you could sort of subtly give to your friend. But, it's overwhelming being a friend and not being able to support them as well. So you need the love in this as well.
If you yourself are struggling with perhaps postnatal depression or postnatal anxiety, or perhaps even perinatal. So like Laura said, her anxiety started long before the baby actually came into the world. It was when she was pregnant. So if you are pregnant and you're listening to this and you're experiencing anxiety and depression and maybe you're not sure or perhaps you're not ready to talk to somebody, the PANDA website itself is a really great resource because there's a lot of information there about what are the signs, what are the symptoms, and where you can go for support. So if you're not sure and you're not ready to talk to somebody, and that's totally fine, get on the website and just have a look at the support resources that they have on there, because I think that might be pretty useful as well.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, so Laura, what's your advice to women, to mums out there? What's your message that you want to get out there to mums who might be struggling with motherhood?
I think you need to put away all those images of the perfect mother because they don't exist. And in all of this, you matter so much and you are so deserving. Everyone always, goes crazy over the baby, but the mother is the person and the father, of course, who created the child. So don't forget that. You created life and you're so amazing and, you deserve wonderful things.
I love what you're doing for women, and I'm just sitting here thinking that I wish I could get this message out to every single mum and mum-to-be, because it is just so important in this world we live in where all we see is filtered Instagram pictures.
Don't think you need to look like them to be perfect, because you just being you is so perfect.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Laura, and thank you for your honesty in sharing your story. Not everybody can have, and not everybody needs to, but not everybody has the courage to tell their story to so many people with so much honesty and raw emotion as you have. So I really appreciate it, not just on my behalf as a mother who has experienced a very similar story, but I appreciate it on behalf of a new mum who might be sitting at home crying and really struggling, but just not realizing that there are hundreds and thousands of other women in this country right at that very second who are feeling that very same emotion and that very same struggle. So thank you so much, Laura, and thank you for becoming a PANDA community champion. I'm so appreciative of what it is that you're doing, and thank you for your time for joining me on the podcast.
You are so welcome, and thank you.
If Laura's story has touched a chord with you, then I really encourage you to hop on the PANDA website, which is panda.org.au, or you can call the PANDA hotline on 1300 726 306. And if you want to connect with Laura, I'll add Laura's details onto the show notes for this podcast, which you can find at www.mumlifeaustralia.com.